going on, YouTube? Well, new car arrived today. We're going to look at 79 Ltd Country Squire. Great car. This is going to round out the collection of 118 wagons so far. We have a 90, or is it 89 Mercury. So we had the Grand Marquis, and now we're going to look at the Ltd. First year for this style Panther. 1979. Came out in late 78. And this is my 1/64 scale one, which was to be like a debut of what the 1/18 scale. I think when this car came out, almost a year and a half ago or longer, they announced that they were going to do the 1/18 scale cars. So now we finally get to look at it after a very, very long time of it being published that it was going to be out. Now we finally can see it. And this is a cool car. They did a pretty good job on it. A big mistake that we'll look at in a minute. And also other mistakes that were brought to my attention that I had missed on the debut of this casting, which was the Mercury. We'll look at them side by side a little later. I think that would be cool. But let's soak it in. So I'm going to start her up and bring her on over. Really, really great looking vehicle. I think it looks very nice. Even the wheel covers look good. Now they're kind of facing the wrong direction. We'll look at the profile in a minute, but I love how they have the LTD, the Ford script, the old school script that they used in the 70s. So that's there. Country Squire. And they got the broader trim on the wood grain, which they had until they kind of skinnied this up in later years. Big metallic blue, light blue interior, very 70s. This car was beaten by General Motors with the downsizing program of the Big Three. Chrysler finally followed suit after Ford, but General Motors, they sold a lot more wagons in 79 than even Ford did, even with a debut model. This did get a lot of good press. Basically a foot shorter than the 78 outgoing model, and also about 800 pounds lighter depending on the trim. So I mean, a big improvement, but also the interior space was the same, if not larger in some respects. So it was a kind of a pretty successful downsizing for Ford, but General Motors did the same thing. Basically it was a lot of more engineering involved, and they kind of got rid of a lot of dead weight in the vehicle, pushed the dimensions to the exterior, and were able to keep basically all the legroom. Can't do that so much nowadays because cars are so over-engineered, but back then in the 70s the American cars were bridging the gap from the 60s into the 80s, and there was a very large change during those decades. So, and this was a platform they did good with. I mean, the thing basically lasted in its form all the way to demise in 2011. You know, a lot of updates, but the basics of the car was still there. Coil spring front with unequal length A-arms, and in the back you had a 4-link coilover. Or not coil, coil suspension, not coilover. So coils, shocks, and a 4-link. That kind of thing. They went up to power rack and pinion steering eventually, but the car is basically the same dimensions the whole time. Let's back this out a little bit and get a view of the paint. Now, if you haven't caught it already, the glaring mistake that Greenlight did, we'll catch it. We'll catch it. Let's zoom in on this insignia real quick. That looks pretty good. A little crooked, but not bad. And then I also do the Ford on the tailgate. This is identical casting to the Mercury. So, metal hinge. They used the door style, because this was the two-way tailgate, of course. Went both ways. This doesn't need a center stoplight on this one because it's a 79. So, I would say that the earlier cars, this casting serves well. The later ones, it needed some improvements. You know, just little things here and there. It's getting caught on the strip. Let's get the blade out. Have to lift the door up a little bit. There it goes. The other thing, they didn't have the paint fully cured, or they didn't prep the plastic surface, so there's a little bit of paint that has been delaminating itself from the plastic under part. I did not do that, it came like that. But you can see the large interior space that's in that car. But that was kind of cool. Same as the Mercury, nothing really different. But like I said, the castings on this car definitely lend itself to the earlier models, especially with the seating arrangement and the steering wheel. Because when they had the earlier one, a lot of the stuff corresponds, especially with the dashboard and everything, and the simple way that the seats don't have any armrests or anything like that. These cars were about $6,600 base model, and they went up to over 10 grand with all the equipment. And I was reading the equipment list for 79. There's actually an article that you can Google, and they had I think a Consumer Reports and a Motor Trend of the era, and it was very funny reading about the car and how they thought about it and everything. I think the front end looks great. Let's take a zoom on it. They do the shorter overhang on the Ford product than the Mercury. The Mercury is extended. That's why it looked a lot longer in the other video. Illinois registration. It's really identical to their, if you want to look real quick, I mean, it's identical to the 164th car that they put out so long ago. I did lift it. That's not how it comes. I have a bunch of these, and one of them I played with a little bit, as you can see. I digress. Grill is good. This is completely how it come out of the package. I have not done anything, so I'll fix the grill. They didn't finish all the black wash very good. And I'm debating on whether to take the orange part off the back. I've seen on this lower clearance light and signal area. On the 79 car, it's kind of confusing. I've seen some where the bottom row of lights is clear lenses, and the top one is amber. And then I've seen cars where it's all amber, and I'm trying to concentrate on the 79 car because I think 80 is a slight tweak, so I'm confused if it should be clear or not, or if this car was sold outside of America sometimes, and they would have different lighting packages. So I'm trying to clear that up before I go there. But if you haven't noticed it yet, as you can see, let's look. I'm going to point to it. We have this rear view, right? And then we have this one. So I'm sure I'll see some thumbs down on this car too. I don't know if it's me or the car. I know that the Mercury, and it was probably because of its inaccuracies, people gave that one thumbs down too. But when you're not having diecast companies make these type of cars, sometimes you have to not pick and choose too much. Another error that was brought to my attention that I probably overlooked, but yes, it is a 4-link, but suspension in the back, but as you can see, they use the leaf springs. Well, what I did on the Mercury, when I bring that car over here, I'll show you what I did to remedy that. This has a pretty good serial number on it. It says, what does it say? Zoom it in for you. 164. So I think that's the serial. So it's a lower production number. Usually if you get the first time they're out, the first week or a few days, sometimes you get lucky with 118 scale. Not with 164, but sometimes you can get lower serial numbers. There's a marking there, and then you have just some basic stuff. But I think this car looks good, and we'll compare it to the Mercury before we leave, and we'll look at the packaging, of course. But as you can see, the Mercury always had a more pronounced front end than the Ford did. So you can see how much longer it is. I also noticed that the bumper's kind of inverted instead of being straight. This kind of is more out here than it is here. So that was kind of unusual. I think on the real car it's pretty much straight. So I thought that was odd. But you can see the dimension of the lighting package. I mean, it's cool. It looks pretty good. They didn't put a bar here. Right there. It's just a kind of one piece, but they kind of put a background. So I think they did a decent job on the grill. You can see Ford is kind of etched on the top of the grill surround. It is missing a hood ornament. They usually had hood ornaments on these cars, especially with the wood grain. I mean, this would have had more equipment on it than usual. But I think it's good. I like it. The other thing they're missing, and everybody can chime in, please. They don't have any ribbing on the taillights. Usually those were ribbed. They weren't straight across like that. The shape is good, though, and you can see the difference between this and the Mercury. They did spend the time to alter the casting, because that is metal. It's not like this is a plastic piece. So they probably used the same mold, but they definitely did separate it to the Mercury, because this is all cut out where this isn't. So they probably went the extra step. Bumpers are basically identical. They just mark black in two different spots, but they're the same. And the other thing, this is obviously by itself, but when you look at period photos, this would have had a black rubber strip here too, as well. I mean, they could be denoting a base car, but I doubt it. So that's probably going to get filled in. But the biggest thing is the mirror. And back then, you would have just had a driver's side mirror a lot of times. This was always an option or not available and sometimes. But so I'll take this off, because I think they eventually went to those mirrors. But early on, they had these too. I'm pretty sure. So maybe we'll leave that. I don't know. If not, I'll have to make a copy of the other one. I have to look into that. I don't think I paid attention to the period photos I was looking at. So there we have it. Panther platform. What an interesting car. They stopped offering the 400s on these motors. And then the top spec was a 351 Ford motor, which had about 130 to 140 horsepower, 2-barrel carb. So not a lot of horsepower, but it really was all about torque. Car had almost 300 foot-pounds. I mean, it was about, depending on where you read, 260 to 270s foot-pounds of torque. So that was plenty. 3-speed automatic before they went to the 4 speeds on this generation of cars. As the 80s progressed, these cars got a lot more equipment. They eventually ended out with, having airbags and anti-lock brakes, but fuel injection came on, then port fuel injection, and computerized. A lot of things were computerized on the car, but they kept the frame. And this car bowed out 1991 was the last year, as 92 ushered in the Aero cars. So they were trying to plan a wagon, but Ford eventually said no, and Chevy was the last one. General Motors was the last full-size American station wagon, and they bowed out in 1996. For none other than increasing truck production at the Texas plant. So Chevy even had to succumb to the SUV craze. This is a great car. Hopefully, I will get more iterations of it. It's going to have a Terminator car. So it's going to be like, I think that car was like either beige or brown or something like that. They also have a 80s Grand Marquis, mid 80s, so it's going to have the square front end. So lots of cars to look forward to. Lots and lots. Let's take a look at the box before we depart. I hope everybody is staying safe and well during these times. Let's take a look at the old box. So typical, it's a foam inside. Unlike the Chrysler cars, like the Monacos and Cornettes, this one actually has they'll screw the base down inside the foam so the car doesn't move around and kind of rub the paint around. So it's a good addition. They try to make their own brochure picture, which I thought was funny. And let's look at the back here. I knocked all my pictures over, just in case you need to see the barcode. And then they have the old 70s, 80s Ford script, which they changed. They changed later on after a few years of using it. So this car has definitely had its fair of different scripts as well. But Panther history. Panther history. Oh, and one more thing. We were talking about the rear suspension. So I just decided to rip it off. So it just comes right off, and it looks better. I mean, it's not 100%. I mean, can obviously put a bar there. I can sculpt it out of styrene plastic and put it in, but no need. These are really basically curbside cars, basically. They're not opening. The only thing that opens is the door. Hope you enjoyed it. I love these cars. Hopefully the whole room gets filled with them eventually. 79 Ltd. Thanks for watching. Till next time.